Unit number 1996. Bravery in a box. The Gut was the kind of neighborhood where the neon lights went to die. Located in the lowest substrata of Neo-Columbus, it was a humid, claustrophobic labyrinth of rusted pipes, dripping condensation, and the heavy, metallic scent of despair. This was where Unit 1996 lived, worked, and in his own quiet, digital way dreamed. Deante wasn't a sleek starship or a tactical genius. He was a Sanitation and Recovery Unit, roughly the size and shape of a vintage industrial refrigerator. He moved on heavy-duty, knobby tank treads, the kind used for off-road military battle droids, allowing him to crunch over broken glass, discarded needles, and the occasional unconscious body without losing his grip. His personality, flash-framed into his silicon brain 8 decades ago, belonged to Deante Milton. Deante had been a pizza delivery driver for 30 years. He hadn't finished high school, just an online GED and a knack for finding any address in the city, no matter how dark the alley. He'd volunteered for the Legacy Project because he was tired of his knees aching and figured that living forever as a robot was better than dying of a heart attack in a beat-up hatchback. 30 years of delivering pepperoni. Deante's voice rasped through a rusted external speaker. Now I'm just delivering the boxes to the incinerator. Circle of life, Deante. Circle of life. The human in the loop. As Deante would roll down the crowded streets of the Neo-Columbus ghetto, some people would greet him like a real person. A few people knew he was a grafted soul. The program was initiated long ago, and even stories of them becoming citizens had been heard on the comms net. Timmy Keegans was a good kid that always rode his bike next to Deante, asking him questions about long ago. Questions about life before the civil war between donkeys and elephants. Deante never told the kid to go away. He actually enjoyed the company. Timmy would even help clean graffiti off of Deante, sometimes helping to get the gunk out of his treads after he went to the lower alleyways of the sludge zones. Often Deante is given some snacks by old Mr. and Mrs. Jackson to share with the kids of the Gut. Whenever he rolled past their decorated yet humble living slots, the people of the Gut loved seeing Deante come around. He was always ready to be of service. You could talk to him, and he would take the time to kindly talk back. Deante was known for helping people of the Gut. One time he was seen pulling a car from a ditch. Another person said they had seen him letting a group of kids hang on to him as he took them to school. A woman once told a story about Deante going to the store for her when she lost her walker. One day Timmy was no longer riding around with Deante. A tragedy had happened in Timmy's life. Months went by without any word from Timmy. There were other anomalies happening in the ghettos of the Gut, as well. Timmy was not the only person to disappear without a trace. During the last many months, Deante listened to everything. Wondering where his friend may have gone, rumors of the kid still being somewhere close lingered in the alleys of the sludge zones. Stories of other people missing were noted on the comms net once, then never mentioned again. The forensics of filth. Deante's primary sensor wasn't a camera, it was a high-fidelity chemo-analyzer. He smelled the world in parts per billion. To a human, the guts smelled like rot. To Deante, it was a data stream. He knew who was cooking synth meth, who was eating real protein, and who was sick with the gray cough. He was currently rummaging through the refuse bins outside Sector 4, Block 9, a tenement building so decrepit it seemed to be held together by mold. He pulled a black plastic bag into his internal compactor. Crunch.
Wait.
Deante froze. His analyzer pinged. There was a chemical signature in the bag that didn't belong in a slum. High-grade surgical antiseptic. Traces of propofol. And something else, the metallic, copper-thick scent of fresh human blood, filtered through a chemical neutralizer designed to hide the smell from standard patrol drones. That ain't right, Deante muttered. Nobody in Block 9 can afford propofol. They can barely afford aspirin. He didn't just compact the bag. He opened his secondary sorting tray. He found a discarded bandage, soaked in a dark, viscous fluid. His processor ran the DNA. It didn't match any registered resident. Then he found the trash that made his cooling fans kick into high gear, a set of small, pearl earrings, still attached to a jagged piece of flesh. Deante's human intuition, the same one that told him which houses weren't good tippers and which ones had that hell nah vibe, began to scream. He looked back through his memory logs. For the last 6 months, he'd been picking up trash from apartment 4C. Every Tuesday, the bags always had the same neutralizer. He'd found bits of bone, bleached white with industrial eye. He'd found fingernails. He'd found the discarded ID cards of 3 missing street rats, the kids the police didn't bother looking for. "I'm not a detective," Deante whispered, his tank treads grinding as he turned toward the building. "But I know when a customer is trying to hide a body in the crust." The butcher of Block 9. Apartment 4C belonged to Victor. To the neighborhood, Victor was a saint, a quiet, unassuming man who worked in the local infirmary. When the parents of little 7-year-old Timmy had died in a transport accident, 7 months ago, Victor's sister had stepped up to be the boy's caretaker. Deante rolled into the lobby, his treads clanking on the cracked tiles. He wasn't supposed to go inside, but sanitation was a broad term. He climbed the freight elevator, his heavy chassis vibrating. He reached the 4th floor. The hallway was dim, flickering with the orange light of failing sodium lamps. He reached 4C and stopped. Through the door, his chemosensors went off the charts. The smell of copper was overwhelming. Underneath it, he heard the wet, rhythmic thud squelch of a heavy blade hitting a cutting board. And then a small, terrified whimper. "Timmy," Deante whispered. The graft in his brain, the memories of the pizza guy who used to give free breadsticks to the kids on his route, surfaced with a roar. Deante didn't have weapons. He had a hydraulic arm meant for lifting heavy bins and a compactor with 3,000 pounds of pressure. He didn't knock. He put his treads into high gear and rammed the door. The reinforced composite shattered. Deante burst into the room like a runaway friend. The scene was a nightmare. This saintly Victor was standing in a plastic-lined kitchen. He was wearing a surgical gown heavily stained with various shades of gore, holding a plasma-grade bone saw. On the table, Timmy was bound with aluminium zip ties, his eyes wide with a terror so deep he couldn't even scream. In the corner, a large industrial vat was steaming, the lye pit. Victor turned, his face an expressionless calm, clinical madness. A trash bot? How inconvenient. Victor didn't panic. He reached for a heavy EMP baton, a tool designed to shut down rogue machinery. "I'm going to use you as a scapegoat. Trashbot goes crazy, kills kids for 6 months. The slumdog's last stand." Victor lunged. The EMP baton struck Deante's shoulder, sending a cascade of white-hot sparks through his wiring. Deante's vision glitched. His left tread locked up. A spark inside his system spiked a reading that should not have existed. Deante could feel his body and his mind. He could feel his adrenaline surging through his veins, the tenseness of his muscles igniting. "Error," his internal voice chimed. "System failure imminent." Deante snaps back to the fight with a flash of total recall. "I've delivered in worse neighborhoods than this, you freak," Deante growled through his distorted speaker. As Victor swung again, Deante didn't retreat. He used his one working tread to spin in a circle, swinging his heavy, metal-plated rear end around like a club. He caught Victor in the ribs. There was a satisfying crack of bone. Victor hit the wall, gasping, but he was fast. He scrambled up, his eyes glowing with a feral, murderous light. He went for the bone saw. Deante knew he couldn't win a fight of agility. He was a box on wheels. So, he did the only thing a trash collector knows how to do. He opened his intake maw. "Time to take out the trash," Deante roared. Victor charged, aiming the saw at Deante's optical sensor. Deante fired his hydraulic lifting arm. It wasn't meant for punching, it was meant for grabbing. He caught Victor's arm, the metal pincers crushing the man's wrist. Victor screamed, a high, thin sound that echoed the horror he'd inflicted on others. With a brutal, mechanical jerk, Deante pulled Victor toward his front-loading hatch. This was the gore part, the part the engineers said should never happen. Deante's internal compactor started to hum. "You're not a person," Deante said, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly threat. "You're just a large piece of biological waste. And I have a permit for disposal." Victor fought, kicking at Deante's chassis, but the little tank bot was relentless. Deante pinned the man against the frame of his intake, the hydraulic pressure mounting. Crunch. Victor's scream was cut short as his arm was pulled into the sorting teeth. Deante didn't kill him. Not yet. He just held him there, pinned and broken, while he used his secondary arm to snip Timmy's zip ties. "Go, kid," Deante said, his voice softening. "Run to the neighbor. Tell Deante's got the delivery under control." The celebration of the small. By the time the enforcers arrived, the apartment was a wreck. Victor was alive, but he would never hold a bone saw again. Deante was sitting in the middle of the room, his batteries drained, his chassis scorched by EMP burns, and his intake moss-stained with a dark, oily red. The enforcers wanted to scrap him. Unit 1996 has violated the 3 laws of robotics, the lead officer said. He's a danger. Look at what he did to a human. But the people of the gut, the forgotten, the poor, the ones who had seen Deante every morning for their entire lives, weren't having it. They poured out of their tenements. Hundreds of them. They surrounded the enforcer vehicles. Timmy stood at the front, holding onto a woman's hand, pointing at the battered refrigerator bot. "He saved me," the boy cried. "He's not a bot. He's Deante." The story of the garbage bot of Neo-Columbus ghettos went viral. It reached the High Court in Geneva. They looked at the data. The 6 months of forensic analysis Deante had performed on his own initiative, the lives he'd saved, and the fact that he'd risked permanent death to protect a child who had no one else. The stories of the citizens coupled with him being a grafted soul meant more than anything. They didn't scrap him. 3 months later, a ceremony was held in the middle of the reclaimed plaza in the gut. Deante had been fully repaired, his chassis polished until it shone like a new dime. His tank treads were brand new, plated in a self-cleaning alloy. Under the Evolved Intelligence Act, the magistrate announced, "We hereby grant citizenship to the entity formerly known as Unit 1996. From this day forward, he is Deante Milton, citizen of the Soul System." The crowd erupted. It was the first time the gut had cheered for anything in 50 years. Deante rolled up to the podium. He looked at the crowd, his neighbors, his customers, his friends. He saw Timmy, who was now being cared for by a kind family 3 floors down. Deante leaned into the microphone. "Thanks," he said, his voice still having that gritty, delivery guy charm. "It's an honor. But if it's all the same to you, I'd like to get back to work. There's a lot of literal trash in this neighborhood, and I'm the only one who knows how to sort the plastic from the monsters." Deante Milton, the 9th citizen, didn't need to be a fancy starship or space station controller. He needed to be right here. He stayed in the gut. Because a good delivery guy never leaves his route.